Well, you had recently posted about signing your solo deal like 20 years ago with
Hmm.
Roadrunner. So yeah, so you had reflected on 20 years of a solo deal with Roadrunner, and kind of
Hmm.
not knowing if it was going to be one album or like what we're talking about today, the 10th one coming up. So kind of go
Yeah.
back to that, man. Go back to the Murderdolls kind of disbanding and you going out solo.
Well, basically, Murderdolls came out in 2002, and we toured for an entire year. So basically, up to 2003, and Joey was kind of forced back to Slipknot. Corey was doing Stone Sour at the same time, and I don't think either one of them wanted to stop the momentum that we both created with the bands. And but yeah, they basically went back to Slipknot to do the third album, and I just came out of this tornado of a dream come true, and I'm like, well, what am I going to do now? And Joey had kind of dangled the carrot of, oh, this is only going to be for like 6 months. Slipknot's only going to do 6 months worth of shows, and then that turned into 2 years or 3 years,
Yeah.
and but at the time I was nervous, and I didn't want to go back to working a day job. And so I started writing music, and once I realized Murderdolls wasn't going to do anything, I kind of tweaked the music a bit. I thought, well, how can I make it different? So I tuned the guitars a little different. Murderdolls was a standard 440 tuning, and I went to a drop C tuning. I thought that would separate it, and
Right.
I guess it kind of did until we did the second Murderdolls record, and we did a drop C tuning, and then it was back to the thing again. But so yeah, I was nervous. I started writing music, and I remember sending Monty Connor demos that I did on this, like, right at my feet here is the same 20-year-old Digitech foot pedal that I basically had a recording. It had 3 minutes of recording time in it, and I did demos. Somehow hooked it to a CD burner, put it on my computer, or burned a CD and sent it to Monty. And I sent him like 10 or 12 ideas, and he thought it was really cool. And he went to the head of Roadrunner and said, "Hey, Wednesday wants to do his own stuff. What do you guys think?" And they said, "No, we, we don't want this." And I went, "Okay." That's what I figured they would say. But I was still signed to Roadrunner, and miraculously, like within that same week of them saying no, I got a phone call from this guy at a label, and he was like, "Hey, I'm a big fan of Murderdolls, but I liked your band prior to that, Frankenstein Drag Queens, and which is the material used on Murderdolls." And he was like, "I'm with this label called Ryko Disc, and we want to release your albums from that." And I went, "Oh yeah, well, how would you like a Wednesday 13 solo record?" He went, "Okay." So I was like, "Well, I'm still signed to Roadrunner, so you have to write me a contract out, and I have to give it to them, and they got to sign off." That's just the basic sort of deal of it.
Mhm.
So they wrote me a contract out for a solo deal. I took it to Roadrunner and said, "Hey, you guys didn't want it. This guy wants it, so can you sign off on it?" And they said, "Oh, well, we kind of want you now."
Right.
And then
Nice.
that's how I got my deal. I got my deal because somebody else wanted it, and they went, "Oh well, maybe we'll take it." And but I was so glad they did, because I had so much momentum built up with Murderdolls, with Roadrunner, and I had a team there that I trusted. And so I did my first deal with them, and they flew me up to New York City around this time 20 years ago. And I sat in the office with Monty Connor, and he and I remember he had what he thought was Grandpa Al Lewis's from the Munsters phone number, because
Okay.
we somehow started talking about the Munsters, and he said, "Hey, let's call him." And he had like a landline, and we sort of prank called. We didn't really prank call. We just called this number, and Al Lewis answered the phone and said, "Hello." And Monty said, "Al Lewis, please." And he goes, "Who's calling?" And you could tell it was Grandpa Monster, pissed that someone was calling his house. And I remember doing that. That was a cool time.
You should have had him come out for the first album, like do some
Oh,
spoken
well,
word stuff for it or something.
he didn't really want our phone call, so getting him out to a show would have been a yeah. But I remember doing that. That was such a cool time, and it was just a just a really cool time. Like they flew me up to the office, and I met everyone, and then I came back from that, and I did like my second UK tour, which before the album even came out. So it was just a real cool, exciting time, and it just felt like nothing could go wrong around that time.
It's got to be validating for you too to kind of sign the solo deal with Roadrunner, because obviously the Murderdolls get signed mainly probably because of Joey and Joey's
Right.
relationship with Roadrunner, and
Hmm.
Slipknot being what they are, the machine that they are, kind of anything with that Slipknot tag on it's going to probably
Yeah.
sell some copies, things like that. So you actually getting a solo record through them,
Yeah.
no matter how you got it, it's got to be validating.
It felt good. It was I was really proud of it. I'm proud of it, you know. I mean, to get a solo deal off being what was considered a side project was,
Mhm.
it was just like, how was this happening for me? So I've had a really interesting past and how things have happened, you know. And at the time, Roadrunner, I mean, it's still look back on, there was a lot of great bands and a lot of great releases on that label.
Oh yeah, and it's got to be great having Monty Connor kind of giving the stamp of approval too. I mean, it's funny. I'm
Yeah,
friendly with him on Facebook, and he'll comment on my things sometimes. And still to
yeah,
this day, I'm like, "Holy shit, man! That's the guy that signed, Sepultura."
yeah.
Like every time I see his name pop up.
Yeah, it was crazy. So Monty was the guy that got me signed to the solo deal. Pretty much. I mean, he was definitely pulling for me, and he was a big fan of Murderdolls, and he liked my band prior to that as well. But he was also the one that told me I was dropped from Roadrunner too.
Hmm.
Monty's just, if you know him, he's honest about stuff, and he was like, "Hey, Wednesday," and it was around this time, 19 years ago, because it was only a year I was signed,
Right.
and he called me right around Christmas, and he was like, "Hey," it's like, "Hey," and he said, "I wanted to call you before you got like an email or something," and he said, "Well, because the label didn't pick up the option," and I was like, "Oh, that's a bummer." And he's like, "Yeah," and I remember him saying this. He said, he goes, "It's nothing to be ashamed of or anything. He goes, you did really well." He said, "Your record sold about 50,000 copies worldwide. That's not bad." And I'm just remember hearing that number, and I went, "That sounds really good. Why why are you dropping us?" But
Yeah.
again, it was, to sell 50,000 records now.
Oh yeah.
That's, you know what I mean? Like, that's crazy. So it was a fun run, and then I signed with Nuclear Blast again, later on, with Wednesday 13 with Monty again. So I've just had a cool history with the label and Monty, and it's all, when I look back on all of this, it's all fun times for me. Nothing's ever like, oh, even getting dropped from Roadrunner is not a bummer for me. I look back on it was a cool thing. I was, all these steps led to where I am today.
That's awesome. So now when whatever label that you're on throughout time, if they don't pick
Mhm.
up an option or say we're moving on, it's just like, okay, well, I'll just move on to the next one. You're not like, oh my
Yeah.
God, the world has ended.
No, and I think that has been the case for a lot of bands. I mean, a lot of bands, really, your whole life, at least from my era of growing up, you studied as a teenager, and you were hoping you would be signed on a record deal, and you worked your whole life, it felt like, to get to that deal, and to have that pulled out from under you. There's a lot of bands that I don't even know where to start, but there's a lot of bands that didn't, they didn't recover from that. They got signed and they got dropped, and then they were done, and they quit doing it, or they just or they people who took their lives because of it. Rock and roll has been cruel and kind to a lot of people, but for me, getting that news, back early in the day, I don't know. I never let those things bother me. I always used it as a, going, well, all right, well, fuck you. I'll, you drop me, I'll get over here, and that kind of mentality just got me to the next one and the next one. And I don't even know how many labels I've been on now.